The snow had been falling since morning, a hush so thick it buried the sound of the world. Lisa Whitmore's boots dragged through drifts that reached her calves, the leather stiff, seams threatening to give. She pulled her frayed shawl tighter around her shoulders, as if a thin scrap of wool might shield her from the gnawing bite of January air, or from the voices that still rang in her ears. "She's no better than the rest of them," Martha Callahan had hissed to another woman at the general store, not caring that Lisa stood only a few paces away. First her husband dead, now wandering about. "You watch, she'll end up in some man's bed to survive." The memory stung more sharply than the cold, though her cheeks already burned raw with frost. Each breath left her chest aching, ribs rattling with exhaustion. She had left the town behind her, left its eyes, its whispers, its judgment that clung to her like burrs. What she had not left was hunger. Her steps faltered. Snowflakes clung to her lashes, heavy as tears she refused to let fall. She had nowhere to go. Her husband's grave lay back in the churchyard, his land lost to creditors, her life dismantled piece by piece until nothing remained but shame. The thought came fierce and cruel. Perhaps she ought to lie down here, surrender her body to the white quiet, and let the cold swallow her. But something in her, a will as stubborn as it was weary, kept her feet moving forward. She followed no path, only instinct, through a grove of black trees whose limbs sagged under snow. The world narrowed to the rhythm of her breath and the drum of her heart. At last she saw the broken outline of a cabin slouched against the slope, roof sagging under the weight of winter, chimney dark. She stumbled toward it, legs trembling, hand catching against the rough wood of the doorframe. The latch hung askew, but she pushed inside and sank to her knees on the dirt floor. Cold air flooded the space through cracks in the logs, but the faint shelter was enough. She lowered herself onto the boards, breath rasping, eyelids heavy. A whisper escaped her lips, hardly sound at all. Already dead. Darkness rose to claim her. When Lisa opened her eyes again, it was not silence that greeted her, but the sound of breathing. Heavy, steady, too close. The fire she had not lit burned on the hearth, its smoke curling lazily upward. Her body stiffened, her eyes searching the dimness. And there, framed against the light, stood a figure. He was tall, his shoulders broad, his chest bare though the wind still moaned outside. His skin, burnished bronze, glistened faintly with melted snow. Black hair hung loose around his face, and his dark eyes watched her with the caution of a wolf who has stumbled upon a wounded doe. She jolted upright, fear shoving through her weariness. "Please, don't touch me." Her voice cracked, harsh against the hush. The man did not move closer. He remained still, as though carved from the same pine beams that held the cabin. His breath misted the air. Slowly, deliberately, he crouched near her, not reaching for her, but setting a strip of dried meat upon the floor between them. Lisa's hands clenched around her shawl. Her body trembled, caught between flight and collapse. He was Apache. She could see it in the cut of his features, in the braids tied with leather at his neck. The town's stories about raiders, about vengeance and blood, clattered in her skull like loose stones. She shook her head, retreating until her back pressed the wall. "Don't." For a long breath he studied her, his face unreadable. Then, with a hand slow as falling snow, he touched the floorboards instead of her. His palm lay flat, steady. And in that small act, his choosing to press his strength into the earth rather than upon her, something within her faltered. He whispered something low in his tongue, words she could not understand, but the tone was not sharp. It trembled, as though he spoke not to her but to ghosts of his own. His shoulders shivered once, a ripple through his frame, though his eyes never left her. Lisa closed her eyes, torn between terror and the strange pull of his restraint. She had been touched before, roughly, carelessly, by hands that claimed her husband's death made her easy prey. But this man did not touch. And that absence, that refusal, shook her more than any grab could. Minutes passed, or perhaps hours. Time was slippery in the dim glow of fire and snowstorm. Her body, starved, betrayed her dignity. The scent of roasted rabbit made her stomach ache. At last she leaned forward, hand unsteady, and pulled the strip of meat toward her. She ate in silence, eyes flicking to him between bites. He watched, not with hunger, not with cruelty, but with something else, a stillness that felt like recognition. When she finished, he nodded once, as if satisfied, and fed another log into the flames. Lisa studied him then, as one might study a dangerous sky. A long scar slashed across his chest, pale against bronze skin. It seemed old, healed yet jagged, a reminder that he too had been cut open by the world. The firelight flickered across his face, revealing the hard plane of his jaw, the shadow of hollowness in his eyes. He looked less like a conqueror than a man carved down by grief. She wrapped her shawl tighter, voice faint. Why are you here?" He did not answer in words she knew. Instead, he lifted his hand and pressed it briefly over his heart, then let it fall. His chest shook once, almost like a sob strangled in silence. Lisa turned her face away, but her throat thickened. For the first time since her husband's death, she recognized herself in another's brokenness. Outside, the storm howled louder, snow against the walls like fists demanding entry. Inside, two strangers sat in the fire's fragile circle, bound by silence, by exile, by wounds the world had carved into them. Lisa stared at her hands, raw from cold, and whispered, "I should leave." But she did not move. Her body knew what her pride denied. She had nowhere to go. The man, this giant of a stranger, rose at last. His shadow filled the space as he crossed to the window. Through the frost-laced pane, torchlight flickered in the distance, bobbing through the trees. Lisa stiffened. Town men. Searching. The Apache's body went rigid. He turned back toward her, his eyes catching the firelight like dark glass. For the first time, she saw not only sorrow but the hint of something else, a warning, sharp as steel drawn from its sheath. The storm outside raged, but it was the quiet inside that carried the greater weight. And Lisa, her breath shallow, realized her cry, "Don't touch me!" had not kept danger away at all. It had only opened the door to a different kind of fate. The fire burned low, throwing long, uneasy shadows along the cabin walls. Lisa huddled near it, her knees drawn beneath her shawl, the dampness of melted snow still clinging to her skirts. Her heart had not settled since the moment she woke and saw him. The giant of a man, bare-chested, skin dark as oiled wood, scars etched like forgotten maps across his frame. She had cried out for him not to touch her, yet here he was, moving quietly in the cramped space, his presence as undeniable as the storm outside. He crouched near the hearth, feeding the flames with split wood. Sparks leapt, smoke curling into the rafters. She studied his movements, wary, though her body betrayed her with tremors she could not hide. The world had taught her that men who lingered in silence often carried the most dangerous intentions. Yet this one did not press near, did not reach for her. Instead, he set about tending the fire with care, as if the glow itself were the only companion he sought. When he turned, Lisa stiffened. He held a small bundle of rabbit meat, skewered and slow roasting over the fire. The scent, rich and savory, clawed at her emptiness until her stomach coiled with shameful need. He set a portion on a flat stone before her, and returned to his own side of the hearth. No words, no command, just the offering. Lisa hesitated. Hunger pressed harder than pride, though she remembered every voice in town that had cut her down. "She'll beg before the month is out," Martha Callahan had crowed. To take the food now felt like proving them right. Yet her hands reached, almost against her will, fingers trembling as she lifted the morsel to her lips. Warmth and salt spread across her tongue. She closed her eyes, silent tears slipping free at the realization of how long it had been since her body had felt nourished. When she dared open them again, his gaze met hers. Not greedy, not triumphant, only still, as though he saw something fragile inside her that no one else had cared to notice. She turned away quickly, curling deeper into her shawl. Her voice, rough from disuse, broke the hush. "Why are you here?" He did not answer with words she knew. His lips shaped syllables in his own tongue, low, measured, almost like a chant. Then, with a hand scarred by work and war, he touched his chest where his heart beat. Slowly, he extended the same hand toward her, but stopped short of reaching. The space between them hung heavy, alive with her dread. Lisa's pulse hammered. The memory of rough hands, of laughter twisted with cruelty, surged like bile in her throat. She recoiled sharply, pressing her back against the log wall. "Don't!" she whispered. The hand dropped. His jaw tightened, yet instead of anger, a tremor passed through him. His shoulders shook once, twice, as though the simple act of holding himself back carried more weight than she could understand. He turned away, gripping the edge of the hearth so firmly his knuckles whitened. She sat frozen, her breath ragged. The fire cracked between them, filling the silence with its restless voice. Slowly, the tremor in him subsided, but Lisa could not forget the sight of it. He was not cold. The cabin was warm enough now. He had shaken for another reason. Minutes bled into hours. He worked in quiet motions, mending a leather strap with sinew, brushing snow from the cracks near the door, while she remained by the fire, lost in the tide of her thoughts. Shame gnawed at her. Shame for her fear, shame for her hunger, shame for the life she no longer had. She remembered her husband's hands, gentle in life, cold in death. The men who claimed she had no worth left. The whispers that stripped her dignity bare. She lifted her eyes once more to the stranger. He bore his scars without complaint, as if they were simply part of his skin, not marks of failure. His silence did not seek to crush her. And though his touch had never come, she felt the echo of it in the air, an absence louder than any contact. At last, he turned toward her, and in the wavering glow she saw exhaustion carve lines deep into his face. "Tahu," he said softly, the name shaped for her to hear. Her lips parted. "Tahu." He nodded once, as if that were enough. The snow roared harder outside, rattling the shutters like fists. A branch scraped along the roof. Lisa drew her shawl tighter, her teeth pressing against her lip. Fear gnawed not from the storm, but from the world beyond it. She imagined the town's faces if they could see her here, alone in a cabin with a man the sheriff had sworn to hunt down if ever he strayed near their land. "They'll come," she whispered, almost to herself. Tahu's dark eyes flicked to the window. Torchlight glimmered faintly in the distance, a small cluster moving among the trees. He rose in one smooth motion, his shadow filling the cabin. The sight made her stomach lurch, half dread, half strange security. He was vast, a wall of muscle and silence, yet for all his size he carried himself like a man forever on the edge of leaving. He moved toward the door, hand resting on the latch. For a heartbeat, she thought he would stride into the storm and vanish. Panic caught her unawares. Her voice slipped out, small and desperate. "Don't leave me." He stilled. Lisa's own words startled her, for she had not meant them. And yet she had. Her body trembled, not from cold but from the terrifying knowledge that she could not bear the loneliness again. Slowly, he turned. His hand, calloused and scarred, hovered in the air. She flinched instinctively, but then forced herself to look. His palm did not lunge, did not grasp, it waited. Something shifted inside her, brittle yet undeniable. She raised her own hand, hesitant as a bird approaching a snare. Her fingertips brushed his knuckles. Just that. A touch as light as snow settling on pine. Tahu inhaled sharply, shoulders shivering once more, his breath rough as though holding it back burned him. His eyes closed. For a moment he looked less like a warrior, and more like a man breaking silently in the dark. Lisa's throat tightened. She did not pull away. The fire hissed, the storm wailed, and somewhere outside, the torches drew closer. Boots crunched over snow. Voices called in the distance. Her hand lingered against his, fragile, trembling. Then she whispered the truth she had long buried. "If they find me here, they'll say I chose this." He opened his eyes then. Dark, endless, steady. The storm might have swallowed the world, but his gaze pinned her in place. The latch of the door rattled, sudden, sharp. Lisa gasped, clutching her shawl, as the shadow of a man fell across the crack in the wood. The torches passed that night without pressing further, their glow flickering like ghostly eyes beyond the frost-streaked window. Lisa had not slept. Her body stayed taut, curled against the wall while Tahu stood sentinel near the door. Each creak of snow, each distant crunch of boots, she feared would be the moment the world came crashing through the cabin. But dawn came soft and gray, and when at last the quiet of morning settled, she dared to breathe again. In town, however, whispers had already taken root. Martha Callahan's sharp tongue carried across the wooden boardwalks. Lisa Whitmore vanished into the storm, not to be seen in church on Sunday, not by the well, not even at the mercantile. "I tell you, she's gone to shame herself," Martha muttered to the blacksmith's wife. "Ran off with an Apache. You mark my words, when she comes back, she'll be no better than the wild women they sell at the river docks." Sheriff Boone heard, and though his face stayed stern, his son Elias laughed loud enough for the whole street to hear. "Imagine it," he crowed. "The widow Whitmore lying under a savage. Fitting, isn't it? She always thought herself better than us." These words would travel faster than snowmelt in spring. By evening they would sit heavy in every hearth. Inside the cabin, Lisa sat by the fire sewing clumsily with sinew and needle that Tahu had given her. Her fingers fumbled, pricked, bled. She had never mended in such a manner, yet she persisted, stitching a torn sleeve of her dress. Across from her, Tahu repaired a broken chair with slow, precise movements. His silence filled the space, not oppressive but steady, like the beat of a drum. When her thread knotted uselessly, she let out a soft groan and dropped the cloth. Tahu looked up. His gaze lingered on her hands, raw with blisters from splitting wood earlier that day. He reached for the cloth, took it gently, and with deft skill finished the seam. He did not speak, but returned it to her lap with a nod. Lisa swallowed hard. The small kindness unsettled her more than cruelty ever had. She had lived so long beneath judgment that gentleness felt dangerous, something she might shatter if she leaned into it. That night, as wind rattled the cabin again, she stepped outside. The snow had settled into crusty drifts, the moon slicing silver through clouds. She walked toward the frozen river, her boots crunching, her breath visible. She bent over the ice, peering at her reflection. A woman with hollow cheeks, eyes bruised from sleeplessness, hair tangled and damp. Half ghost, half flesh. The sight hollowed her further. Then a shadow fell across her reflection. Tahu stood behind her, his figure tall, the moonlight catching the scar across his chest. In the ice, their shapes overlapped, indistinct, as if two exiled souls had fused into one. Lisa's breath caught. She turned sharply away, clutching her shawl, but the image haunted her. His shadow joined to hers, inseparable. The days crawled on. Each morning, Tahu hunted in silence and returned with game. Each evening, Lisa cooked awkwardly over the fire, hands shaking as she tried to season with pine needles or salt he carried in a pouch. He never corrected her. He only ate, slow and steady, his gaze lowering whenever she looked his way. Yet outside their fragile haven, the tide of gossip swelled. The women in town gathered at the well, their voices sharp with pity and disdain. "I knew she'd fall," one whispered. "Always thought herself too proud." Martha Callahan fed every ember into flame. And Sheriff Boone, his pride entangled with his duty, declared he would ride come week's end to bring Lisa back from whatever disgrace she had chosen. Elias smirked and promised to join, his laughter carrying. In the cabin, Lisa pressed her palms to her face, as if she could shield herself from words she could not even hear but felt like a chill beneath her skin. The world beyond their fire was tightening its net. She tried once to speak of it. "They'll say things," she whispered, staring at the fire. "Things you don't understand. They'll call me ruined. They'll call you worse." Her voice cracked on the last word. Tahu's brow furrowed. He shifted, set aside his knife, and traced with his finger the scar over his chest. Then he placed that same hand flat against the earth floor, the gesture deliberate. His voice rumbled low. Words she did not know, yet she understood. His shame, too, had been written by others. His exile was carved into flesh and silence. Her throat tightened. For the first time, she whispered his name, barely audible. "Tahu." He lifted his head. Their eyes met in the wavering firelight, and something moved between them. Not declaration, not promise, but recognition. Lisa turned away, unable to bear the weight of it. She busied herself with folding blankets, though her fingers shook. She could not let herself believe in that recognition, not when the world beyond would crush it. But the smallest shift had already taken root. Each gesture grew heavier with meaning. The way he placed wood by her side before she asked, the way she poured him water before drinking herself. Small exchanges, fragile threads weaving between them. One evening, a howl split the night from deep in the forest. Lisa startled, nearly dropping her sewing. Tahu set his hand briefly over hers to steady her. The touch was fleeting, yet her heart pounded so hard she feared he could hear it. He pulled away quickly, his body shivering as if restraint itself scalded him. Lisa pressed her palm to her own chest, breath trembling. She did not understand how such a brief contact could rattle her so deeply. Perhaps it was because it carried no demand, no hunger, only steadiness. She lay awake long after, listening to his breathing across the cabin. She thought of her reflection in the ice, their shadows overlapping. She thought of the town's whispers sharpening like knives. Between these two truths, shame and shadow, she felt suspended, uncertain where she belonged. At dawn, boot prints appeared near the treeline. Fresh. Lisa saw them as she stepped out to gather snow for melting. Her breath caught. Her eyes darted to Tahu. He crouched over the tracks, his jaw tightening. He touched the snow as if reading a message in its depth. When he rose, his eyes met hers with the weight of an unspoken truth. The search was closing in. Her knees weakened. She clutched the pail to her chest. "They're coming." Tahu nodded once, slow, grave. His silence was an answer she did not want. She turned back toward the cabin, but every step felt like walking toward a gallows. The fire waiting inside was warm, but it could not burn away the cold certainty settling in her chest. The world would not let her choose exile without punishment. That night, she dreamed of the river ice shattering beneath her, her reflection breaking into shards. And in the dream, it was Tahu's shadow that pulled her up, his scarred hands steady against hers. She woke gasping, tears slick on her cheeks. The storm outside quieted, but inside, a greater storm gathered. At dawn, a figure appeared at the cabin's edge. Sheriff Boone, his coat dusted with frost, stood tall in the snow with a rifle resting against his shoulder. Behind him lingered Elias, smirking, and 3 other men carrying torches though daylight glimmered. Lisa froze at the sight through the window. Tahu's hand closed into a fist. The knock came, heavy as judgment. The knock reverberated through the cabin like the crack of a rifle, each thud carrying the weight of judgment. Lisa's breath snagged in her throat, her body trembling against the wall as though the very timbers might collapse under the sound. Tahu's eyes narrowed, his chest rising slow, deliberate, like a man preparing not for battle but for endurance. Sheriff Boone's voice rang out, muffled through the wood but hard as iron. "Lisa Whitmore. Open this door. You're coming home where you belong." The word home struck her cruelly, for she had none. The town had cast her out long before the snow, long before she stumbled into this cabin. Yet the word echoed with the weight of demand, as if her body itself were property to be claimed. Tahu moved toward the door, his frame filling the space, the air around him taut. Lisa's hand shot out, clutching his arm. Her voice broke on a whisper. "If you fight them, they'll kill you." His gaze flicked to her hand gripping his skin. For a heartbeat he did not breathe. Then he lowered his head, and she saw it, the trembling again. Not fear, not weakness, but the effort of holding his strength still when it longed to break loose. Boone's fist hammered again. "Lisa, you answer, or I'll come in. The town won't stomach this shame." Lisa's eyes closed, shame curling inside her belly like fire. She rose on shaking legs, shawl wrapped tight, and stepped toward the door. Tahu shifted, blocking her path, his shadow draped over her like a shield. She shook her head. "If I hide, they'll only make it worse." With a slow, shuddering breath, Tahu stepped aside. She opened the door. Snow swirled in, biting her face. Boone stood firm, his rifle slung casual yet ready, his jaw tight. Behind him, Elias leaned against a post, smirking, his torch dripping embers into the snow. The other men shifted uneasily, their faces carved with both cold and suspicion. "Lisa," Boone said, his voice loud enough for the others. "Step away from that savage. We'll see you safe. The good people of town are waiting." Safe. The word twisted bitter in her chest. These were the same voices that had spat on her in whispers, that had said her name like a curse. She lifted her chin, though her body shook. I'm not unsafe. Elias laughed, sharp and cruel. Not unsafe? With him? What's he done to you, widow? Or should we all guess? Lisa's face burned. Shame pressed her down like snow on a weak roof. She could not answer. Her throat was thick with unshed tears. Tahu moved then, stepping into the doorway, the firelight behind him casting his frame in bronze and shadow. He said nothing, but the silence of his presence pressed heavier than any shout. His scar gleamed pale against his chest, his breath steaming in the cold air. Boone's eyes hardened. You think you can stand there and take what's ours? Tahu's hand flexed, but he remained silent. Lisa's voice came, shaking but louder than before. I'm not yours. The words startled even herself. Boone's eyes widened. Elias sneered. The men murmured, shifting, uncertain. Boone barked back. You don't know what you're saying. That man's a curse. You'll not ruin what little respect your husband left behind. The name of her husband broke like glass inside her. Samuel, buried, cold in the ground, leaving her to be picked apart by pity and scorn. Her fists clenched at her sides. Respect? Where was it when they called me spoiled goods? Where was it when your own son mocked me in the street? Elias flinched, though his smirk did not fade. The silence after her words was colder than the wind. Boone shifted, his authority cracked but not broken. You'll regret this, Lisa. Think hard. Her body wavered. Every lesson of survival screamed at her to bow her head, to step forward, to let them drag her back into the world that despised her. Yet when she turned her face, she saw Tahu's eyes, dark, steady, trembling not with rage but with the unbearable weight of restraint. She saw a man who had known exile deeper than hers, and yet who still stood without breaking. She whispered, more to herself than anyone else, "Don't break. Not for me." His jaw clenched. A muscle twitched in his cheek. The storm howled louder, rattling the bare branches above them. Boone shifted his rifle higher, a threat masked his readiness. The other men raised their torches, their faces caught between righteousness and fear. The moment teetered, fragile as ice ready to give way. Lisa's knees weakened. She pressed her hand against the doorframe for balance, her breath short. She could feel the men's eyes on her, carving shame into her skin. Yet beneath it, she felt Tahu's nearness like a wall at her back. She spoke again, voice thin but carrying. "I won't go." Gasps broke among the men. Elias spat into the snow. Boone's face darkened with fury. "Then you've chosen ruin." Lisa's chest heaved. She turned fully toward him, tears freezing at her lashes, and for once she did not hide them. "I've been ruined since Samuel died. The only thing I have left is dignity. And I'll not let you take that too." Her words cracked through the cold like a whip. Even Boone faltered, his grip on the rifle tightening though his eyes betrayed uncertainty. Elias's sneer faltered for a flicker of a second. The men behind him looked away, as though ashamed to meet her gaze. For a long, harrowing moment, no one moved. Then Boone dropped his voice low, rough as gravel. "You'll regret this when the town shuts its doors to you for good." Lisa's lip trembled, but she held her ground. The sheriff turned sharply, his coat snapping in the wind, and signaled the men away. Torches dimmed as they retreated, leaving only Elias lingering, his smirk bitter as he cast one last look. "He'll leave you too. You'll see." Then he followed his father into the dark. Snow swallowed their footsteps, and the storm closed around the cabin once more. Lisa sagged against the doorframe, her body shaking with the weight of what she had done. She could hardly breathe, her chest tight with terror and something sharper, something almost like freedom. Tahu closed the door, barring the world out again. He turned to her. For a moment, neither spoke. The silence between them was heavy, not empty. His eyes met hers, and though no words passed, the recognition returned, stronger, undeniable. Her hand lifted, trembling, until it pressed lightly against his scar. His breath caught, his body trembling harder now, as though her touch were a storm he could not weather. Lisa's voice broke into a whisper, raw and unguarded. "I can't go back." The storm outside howled like a beast, and in its roar came the faint sound of hoofbeats, retreating, for now. But through the window, unnoticed, another torch burned. A lone figure stood watching from the trees, silent, waiting. Snow fell heavy through the night, thickening the silence until the world outside seemed erased. Lisa sat by the fire, her shawl clutched close, her pulse still trembling from the confrontation at the door. The weight of her defiance pressed down like a stone, both terror and release. Across from her, Tahu sharpened his knife with slow, deliberate strokes, the sound of steel against stone carrying a rhythm that steadied her nerves. Neither spoke, but the space between them hummed, alive with all that had been said and all that had been held back. The storm's howl faded near dawn, replaced by the crunch of boots in snow. Lisa stiffened, her eyes darting to Tahu. He had already risen, his body still as carved wood, his breath slow. Through the cracks in the shutter, faint orange glows bobbed in the trees. Torches again, more of them this time. The men had not gone home to forget. They had gone home to gather. Lisa's throat tightened. Her voice broke the hush, ragged with dread. "They'll kill you if you stand against them." Tahu's gaze lingered on her face, unblinking. He set the knife down. For the first time he stepped closer, his presence towering but not pressing. He lifted his hand, hovering near her cheek but not touching, trembling with the weight of restraint. His voice came, low and rough, the single word he had shaped for her before. "Tahu." She whispered his name back, her lips trembling. "Tahu." A pounding at the door shattered the fragile moment. Sheriff Boone's voice carried, louder, sterner than before. "This ends now. Step out, Lisa. Step away from him, or we'll drag you out." Lisa's hands curled into fists. Her whole life had been lived by bending, by bowing to judgment, by letting others carve her place for her. But here, in this cabin with the firelight and the man who trembled only from holding himself back, she found herself unwilling to bow again. She rose, her legs unsteady but her chin lifting. "I won't," she said, loud enough for the door to carry it. Her own voice startled her. There was a pause, then Elias's sneer rang out. "Then burn with him." The door rattled. The men shoved against it, their weight slamming into the frame. Tahu braced it with his shoulder, his muscles straining, his jaw clenched. Lisa stumbled back, heart pounding as smoke curled beneath the crack of the door. Torches had been thrust into the wood. The cabin was being set alight. Panic clawed her chest. Flames licked at the edges, smoke thickening. She coughed, eyes stinging. Tahu turned, his face fierce in the glow. He motioned sharply toward the back wall, where the logs were weakest. With his axe, he struck, the blows loud and desperate. Splinters flew. Lisa pressed her sleeve to her mouth, tears spilling as the smoke grew choking. The wall gave way at last. Cold air rushed in, bitter and clean. Tahu shoved her through first, his hands steady at her waist, then followed into the storm. Snow swallowed them, but behind, the cabin's roof crackled and roared with fire. The men were there, circling. Boone's rifle gleamed, Elias's smirk widened. "Caught you," he spat. "Thought you'd run forever?" Lisa stood shaking, smoke clinging to her hair, fire at her back. Tahu moved in front of her, body shielding her, his axe in hand. Boone raised his rifle, aiming square at his chest. "No!" Lisa cried. She rushed forward, standing beside Tahu, her shawl falling away, her face lit by both fire and moonlight. "You'll have to kill me too." The men faltered, the certainty of their righteousness dimming under her defiance. Boone's jaw tightened, his eyes shifting. Elias sneered but his voice cracked. "You're a fool, Lisa. He's using you." Her voice rose, stronger than she'd ever heard it. "He's the only one who hasn't." The words struck like a bell in the frozen clearing. For a heartbeat, silence fell. Even the fire behind them seemed to hush. Boone's rifle wavered. He looked at Lisa, her tears, her defiance, her body trembling yet unyielding, and something in his face shifted. Shame, perhaps, or the sting of truth. Slowly, his rifle lowered. But Elias lunged forward, torch raised, fury snapping his features. Tahu's hand shot out, gripping the boy's wrist. With one motion he twisted, forcing the torch into the snow, the flames hissing out. Elias cried out, falling to his knees, humiliated but unharmed. Tahu released him, his axe never swung. His restraint spoke louder than violence ever could. The other men looked away, their courage shriveling in the face of such control. Boone barked at his son to rise, his own face taut with anger, but no order came to attack again. One by one, the men pulled back, their torches dimming against the snow. At last, only Boone and Elias remained, their breath steaming, their authority broken. Boone spat into the snow, his voice hollow. "Then stay with him. Don't come back to town. You'll get no welcome there." Lisa's chest heaved, but her voice was steady. "I don't need your welcome." Boone turned, his coat whipping in the wind, Elias stumbling after. The sound of their retreat faded into the storm. The fire in the cabin collapsed with a final groan, sparks scattering into the night. Lisa stood shaking in the snow, her bare hands raw, her hair wild, her tears freezing on her cheeks. Tahu stood beside her, his axe lowered, his breath heavy. Slowly, she reached out, her hand trembling, and touched his. This time he did not pull away. His hand closed around hers, strong, scarred, steady. He trembled, yes, but not from restraint. From release. The snow fell quieter now, blanketing the blackened ruins of the cabin, muffling the world's cruel voices. Lisa turned her face toward him, her voice breaking into something softer than she had spoken in years. "I'm not afraid." And in that moment, though the night still held its cold, she felt the fire that no storm could smother. The fire of dignity reclaimed, of two exiles finding a place not given but made.